Hello everybody and welcome back to Punting Pioneer. I'm Corbin Hosler and this is Pioneer Humans. It is White Weenie in Pioneer, everybody. Look at how many 1-drops we have. I love this deck. I've seen a couple versions of it floating around and it seems like, heck, if all-out aggro is going to be successful in Pioneer, now is the time to try it, right? You can try whatever you want in Pioneer. It's wide open to experimentation and that's what we're doing today. So look at this, 26 1-drops. Of which 23 of them are creatures. We've got Boros Elite. That'll be a 3/3 when you attack with it and other creatures. We've got a Cleric, because we have to have a Kaldheim card, right? This is actually a pretty neat one that has Vigilance and in some cases can distribute a counter where you want it. Dauntless Bodyguard. Well, we get to protect other creatures. Sounds pretty good, right? Kytheon. Well, hey, Kytheon might grow up to be a Gideon in this Planeswalker. All you have to do is attack with it and 2 other creatures. Something we can do quite easily. Plus, hey, it's a 2/1 for 1. You'll notice that theme. Mardu Woe-Reaper, 2/1 for 1. And on top of that, it can exile cards from graveyards, which is very relevant, at least creature cards from graveyards. Keeping on, Soldier of the Pantheon. This one has protection for multicolored, and it can gain you some life. And then one of my favorites ever, Thraben Inspector. It comes down, it's a human, it investigates, it gives you cards later. So that is a lot of 1-drops. The one I did not mention, Brave the Elements. What is good when you have a bunch of little small creatures out? Giving them all protection for 1 color and attacking. That's what this card allows us to do. All for 1 mana. Declaration in Stone, a little bit of removal in the deck, but here's where we get going. This is a new one, Luminarch Aspirant. This will get the beatdown going. It's a 1/1 human for 1, but every upkeep every combat, it's distributing a counter, allowing you to attack. And of course, you'll remember this one from Modern. Thalia's Lieutenant will put counters on all of those humans and get counters itself. Up the curve here, you'll notice we're only playing 18 lands, 16 planes at Castle Ardenvale. I hope to never activate. And a Shefet Dunes that I wouldn't mind activating once. But Benalish Marshal will pump all of our creatures, and so will Venerated Loxodon here at the top end. Straightforward, everything in the deck costs 2 or less except for the Marshals, and these Loxodons should be pretty free most of the time. That is it. White Weenie and Pioneer, everybody. On to the sideboard. I'm going to try this out. Knight of the White Orchid might bring these in for, some of the redundant 1-drops if we're on the draw. It is, in fact, a human and can ramp you if your opponent's ahead of you. So, Devout Decree, that'll give us some removal for black and red type stuff. Mono black is, of course, very good in the format, and having exile effects is strong. We've got more Graveyard Hate, Tormod's Crypt, Soul Guide Lanterns, and Damping Sphere for all your combo needs. That's it, everybody. White Weenie and Pioneer. It is straightforward. It is fun, and I am looking forward to recording these matches. Let's jump right in. All right, here we go. White Weenie and Pioneer, everybody. This looks like a hand. This looks like exactly what we want. 3 1-drops. We're going to have an incredible curve lined up here. I'm excited to see if we can make this work. Let's get things started with, I guess the Soldier of the Pantheon, right? It's got protection. Not that that probably matters quite yet. Protection for multicolored, but this will allow us to attack for 2 on turn 2 while we add to it. And my opponent dorking around with foretelling cards have to feel pretty good about that development. I mean, look at what we have on tap here. Play a Boros Elite, play a Dauntless Bodyguard, and we will choose, I guess, the Boros Elite. That's the one that will at least attack for the most. And look, the beatdown begins. Our opponent put a card into exile on their second turn, and we put a whole bunch of power out. I'm anticipating attacking for 10 on turn 3. People, 10 on turn 3. That is incredible. Now, of course, our opponent passing back with all this blue mana. Hey, they probably looking at a counterspell here. But even if the counterspell, they get attacked for a ton. And look, they don't have it. So, all right, here we go. Get the beatdown on. Turn 3, swing for 10. Welcome to White Weenie and Pioneer. That is a heck of a clock right there. Our opponent's going to play a Dictative Crufix so that we all get to draw extra cards. I don't know what they want to do with this. I don't know where they're going, but I know if they don't have an answer to our board right now, they're just going to fall over and we're going to be on to game 2. And look, our hand is so far from tapped out. We have these Thalia's Lieutenants to put more counters on the team. If we draw a land, we get to add so much more power to play. On turn 3, I'm so excited about playing this deck. This is an incredible start. So our opponent's going to pass the turn back here with 4 mana open. No Cryptic Command in this format. We get to draw an extra one. And the extra one is pretty good, is it not? Let's play Thalia's Lieutenant number 1. It's going to be very difficult for my opponent to not get attacked for lethal on this turn, I'll say that. Well, that's one way to do it. All right, the shore has been engulfed, I guess. I like our opponent's deck already. Bounce all of our creatures like that. That's pretty neat. Okay, well, heck then. I guess I'll play this Dauntless Bodyguard. Protect the Thalia's Lieutenant. And re-add the Boros Elite, I guess. I mean, the thing is, we're essentially, I believe, going to present a lethal attack every turn from here on out. So, I don't know how many engulf the shore type effects my opponent has. But they're going to need all of them, and they're going to need to find them with these dictates. We put the pressure on very quickly, and keep in mind, this is a game in which we were on the draw. If we'd been on the play, our opponent would have just died before they even had a fourth land in play. So this is pretty neat. This is pretty neat here. I currently have, if nothing resolved, if nothing gets added to the board, I'm currently lined up for a 7 attack here. And I don't think a Teferi is going to stop us, because we are going to come in with another Thalia's Lieutenant here and another trigger. So this is going to be difficult for my opponent to not fall over to. Although I suppose we're unlikely to win this turn, because they're going to end up phasing something out here. So all right, let's go. I want to make them phase out this thing. So I'm going to go Benalish Marshal here, see what happens. And now I'm going to add another Thalia's Lieutenant, because I can. All kinds of triggers working. All right, now let's move to combat and see what my opponent has to say about it. All right, so we're going to phase out. This is beautiful. Or I guess it doesn't come back, so we won't get more triggers. But they're going to phase out the Thalia's Lieutenant and leave us with an attack for 7, which is not lethal. So I'm going to send this at the Teferi, this at them, and see what happens. All right, Teferi down. It was an expensive, and it wasn't even a fog. I mean, it was an expensive card for my opponent to not lose the game on the spot, but they still need another bounce spell to be able to do anything here. So it is certainly possible. There you go. All runs Epiphany from Kaldheim there, taking an extra turn, making some blockers. So this is what they want to do. I mean, hey, it's taking turns in Pioneer. I did quite a bit of work on this deck in Modern back in the day, and I always made sure to highlight the most unique turns deck I ever saw. The infamous quadruple sleeved blue-red taking turns deck in Modern piloted by Daniel Wong. I put him on camera every chance I got when I was doing GPs, and you know we had feature matches back in the day, right? I loved that deck, quad sleeved, and I think he top 8 at GP Vegas with it. I mean, taking turns. I think at that point he might have been playing blue black, but taking turns was a very real archetype in Modern for a long time, and I really enjoyed it. Put a lot of work into it. So here we go. Our opponent's at 4. We have a mess of lethal attackers, I think. Let's see what happens here. So I think that I start by playing the Soldier of the Pantheon. Get our triggers. I want to make sure. I'm trying to figure out what happens if I pop the Shefet Dunes here. Does that guarantee lethal? Yeah, that turns every attacker into lethal. So I'm just going to go ahead. I said I wanted to activate it exactly once. I'm going to activate this Shefet Dunes and see if it gives us the push we need. Good old +1 to the team. We will send 5 lethal attackers here, and our opponent has 2 blocks and access to 4 mana. So, I mean, look, if it's another Engulf the Shore, that seems bad, but I'm not quite sure that's what we're looking at here. No, it is. However, for my opponent, notice, I mean, look, they were able to block to not lose the game here. Whoa, what is this? I'm sorry, everybody. Looks like we accidentally double queued there. Maybe we'll play that one next. Let's remember that our opponents Engulf the Shore, as powerful it is, only bounce the things with 5 or less toughness. That's how many islands they had. So the Thalia's Lieutenant's still around, the Boros Elite's still around, and that's huge because it means, once again, I think we can attempt to present a lethal attack. Although I have to say, this is how the game wants, you know, if my opponent wants the game to go this way. I don't want to get in this. I'm sorry, friend. I'm sorry, everybody, bear with me here. Wanted to make sure we got a match. Looks like we accidentally got 2 mini matches. Let's see what we're up to now. It is a Karn's Temporal Sundering, bouncing the Thalia's Lieutenant, taking another turn. I have to say, I'm impressed by my opponent's deck. No matter what happens here, they're doing it with taking turns, right? I don't know how many turns effects there are in Pioneer. I don't know how many Engulf the Shore type bounce effects there are. But this is pretty neat. This is pretty cool what they're up to right now. They're going to take another turn, continue to draw a bunch of cards. Oh, by the way, the Narset is a lock with the Dictate here. I think they might have us. This seems like obviously the key card in the matchup, right? This is the only reason we haven't won this game by now, even with all the turn. We could beat all the turn spells the way it's going if they don't have the bounce effect. But now with 8 cards in hand and a bunch of mana, and we're behind, I think the corner might be turned for the mono blue player. Which, hey, I appreciate it, right? I'm kind of playing the fun police with the white weenie deck that, you know, not going to let you mess around with something like this. But, hey, they're doing it, right? Now, a hard cast Shark Typhoon. Love it. What my opponent... So here's our out. Our out is top decking Brave the Elements and giving this protection from blue when they go to phase out our Boros Elite. I think we could go double Thalia's Lieutenant to make it a 4/4, draw Brave the Elements to punch it through. And that's our window right now because we're kind of locked between the Narset and the Dictates here. And that is in fact not a Brave the Elements. So, okay, this does not seem very good for us, does it? Well, let's start playing some stuff out here. I guess I'll go with the Mardu Woe-Reaper. Not that there's any creatures over there to get rid of. All right, Thalia's Lieutenant number 1. Thalia's Lieutenant number 2. So this Boros Elite is at least lethal. We can send at them. They might trade. I'm actually going to attack the Teferi here. At least make them go ahead and burn the... I mean, they can just chump block, right? So we're at least clearing it out. Our hope here is that our opponent floods out or draws cards that, you know, eventually lose any Brave the Elements we might find. We just keep spamming out attackers. So as long as we keep putting out lethal attackers, they're going to desperately be in need of another bounce spell. A sort of a mass bounce spell. Although 11 mana in the pool, this can't be good for me. What a wild deck. Mono blue taking turns, Dictate a Cruffix, Narset locks, Shark Typhoon to Fairies, Engulf the Shore. Hey, that's a thing. Okay, so our opponent is going to hardcast another Shark Typhoon with 5 mana left over in their pool. That's a turn spell, Temporal Trespass. But now they have lethal. I'm dead. What an incredible game. Okay, you know what? I just have to give it to them. Their deck did exactly what it was supposed to do in a difficult matchup. That was really neat, actually. With that said, do I even want to change anything? I don't even think we want the Damping Sphere. It doesn't seem that relevant. We're going to be on the play. This is black and red. I mean, I can exile their graveyard to keep them from temporal trespassing, but it doesn't seem what's up. So we're just gonna run it back, honestly. Big fan of taking turns, I have to say. If I'm gonna lose with this really neat white weenie deck, that is something I can accept losing to. Now I guess we see what their sideboard looks like, right? They might have board wipes. I'm not sure. I don't really know what Mono Blue has for our deck that wasn't in the main deck already. Not exactly fogs or something they can board in. So we'll go first. And look, I think you have to keep a hand like this. This is basically what the deck does, right? Obviously, ideal is two lands in hand. But look, we've got 1-drops for days, right? Let's begin the beatdown and see what happens. Very land-like deck, that's for sure, that we're playing. So we had a great start last game. And let's hope that we can, you know, get around to something like that here. I probably actually should play the Dauntless Bodyguard. Not that we really want to protect the Soldier of the Pantheon, but I don't think that line of text on this card is relevant. I think it might have been more relevant to just have the 2/1 and play the Boros Elite next turn, but we'll see here. Fortunately, we do hit a land. I think that's pretty clutch. What's the play? Is it the old blink of an eye? Well, that is not what they want to be doing exactly. But, you know, that's where they're at. So, all right, let's play the Soldier of the Pantheon back out. Now we can run out the Dauntless Bodyguard. I guess I'll protect the Boros Elite. Not that it seems super relevant here. We have 3 attackers, though. That means we can trigger the Boros Elite, and we've got the Thalia's Lieutenant to come down. Or with that, we can actually just run the... well, you know what? I think I probably want to play the Thraben Inspector here, and then the Thalia's Lieutenant. Lines us up for a pretty big attack here. We're still spamming out the board. Our opponent's going to have the Engulf the Shore on turn 4, or they're going to lose on turn 4. So, or I guess it'd be our turn 5, right? And there's the Dictate. Okay. The difficult thing for them is that Dictate does give us cards, right? It is essentially just Engulf the Shore that gets them out of this. And they don't have it. They know that, and they don't have it. So there you go. All right, well, this is what the Knight of the White Orchids are in here for. I'm going to get rid of a Venerated Loxodon. I'm going to get rid of a Benalish Marshal because, I mean, we're going to draw a bunch of cards. We just want to spam attacks and knock our opponent out as fast as possible. And to that extent, I'm going to cut a Thraben Inspector. As much as I love it, and I do very much love that card, it's only 1 power, and it gives us a, you know, a late game effect, cracking that clue that is not particularly going to be relevant in this matchup. Ship this one. Keep this one. Look at this. I mean, there's everything is going to attack for more than 2 except the Thraben Inspector. So I guess that's the one we put back. Oh, you know what? They get Mystic Sanctuary to put stuff on top of their library. I won't lie. The wheels are turning over here, folks. You might see a couple weeks from now some taking turns in Pioneer. Look at this, though. Nothing but the 2-power 1-drops. I love it. We are turning the screws. That is what we can do. Put the pressure on our opponent. Hope that we don't stumble and just make them deal with it. So we'll get in, start the beat down with the Woe-Reaper here, and keep going. Okay, let's see if they have anything on 2. They're a blink of an eye on the Woe-Reaper. Well, if that's what you're going to do, friends, you might want to do it in combat. You allowed me to get in 2 free damage there. And I think it's probably pretty clear based on what they've seen from us that you were going to have to bounce something there. So I'm glad we were able to get in damage. And now this is pretty nice. My opponent is probably foretold the Epiphany, the turn spell. So let's just go Bodyguard. Or Woe-Reaper, I guess. And then Lieutenant. We'll get in a nice big hit here. Well, you know, considering what we have access to anyways. I mean, swinging for 5, but look, I think we can come up with 13 points of damage next turn. Teferi is a super beatable card right now, right? So Teferi is very good, but Teferi's not the Cruffix Dictate. It's not an Engulf the Shore. We should be able to get in a pretty decent hit. And obviously that was the best possible draw. As it usually is when you're playing a Humans deck, right? Okay. Play the second one here. And see what kind of attack we've got when we're done. Okay, so my opponent's at 13. I can swing for... Ooh, I have 12. I have 12 here, don't I? Because if they pop out, you know, if they were to phase this thing out, right? Because this is going to attack as a 5/5. They'd end up taking 4, 8, 12, which is not lethal. So I think we're going to take out the Teferi by setting 2 creatures at it and then sending the rest at them. This just gives indestructible, right? It's not, yeah, okay. All right, so this will ensure that Teferi goes down no matter what they phase, and then we will get in for, you know, hopefully 9 damage here. The point is every attack after this turn should always be lethal, right? And my opponent sees that and is in fact going for the loot here with the Teferi. I guess the Teferi sticks around this way. Or no, I'm sorry, we swung 8 at it. All right, that thing's down. This is what we want. Our opponent's at 4 life. It is engulfed the shore bust yet again for them. And they don't have it, everybody, and that's how you do it. Look, game 1 was sweet. I loved watching that deck go off, but I'll tell you, I like winning with our White Weenie deck much more. White Weenie and Pioneer, it is, I'm excited to play this deck. I would love to see this become sort of a force in Pioneer. We've got mono black. There's mono green Planeswalkers is a big deck because, you know, Land of War Elves and Elvish Mystic kind of dominate this format. If thoughts like the axes are kind of Thoughtseize and then Land of War Elves, it seems. So I'd love to see something like this pop up and kind of change sort of what the calculus is in Pioneer. And that was really fun. So let's get into the next one. All right, here we go. White Weenie, we are on the play. We have a keeper, and I have to say, I'm excited for this match. My opponent is running some kind of a Luris deck over here. They said they're a big fan of the series. So shout out to them for watching. And I told them they may get to see themselves crush me on camera now. So here we go. Let's run out of Mardu Woe-Reaper and begin the White Weenie attacks. We get to follow up next turn. I mean, frankly, this is not an incredible opening hand, but it is good. We have no idea if the Declaration in Stone, which is a really neat card, it's just sort of it's non-specific removal, right? It's not. Gosh, I'm sorry, I can't speak here. It's a unconditional removal spell for any creature, but more than that, it gets everything with the same name. This is incredible at taking out tokens and the like. And then, of course, it leaves them some clues, but we're not too worried about that, right? So, okay, Blood Chief's Thirst takes down the Woe-Reaper. And now, well, I guess this is not often that this deck is inefficient with its mana, but all we have is the Thraben Inspector. So this is certainly going to be an interesting match to start off with. And the thing is, I would have played the Woe-Reaper this turn rather than crack the clue, even if we had led with the Inspector. So I considered it, but I think it's just always correct with this deck to put out as much power as possible. So that said, I'd actually love to get this Woe-Reaper or draw another one because my opponent playing Black-Red Pyromancer here going to fill their graveyard, going to do some pretty powerful stuff with that. So, and here we are with nothing too incredible. I think I'm just going to go ahead. Well, I mean, they're going to block. I'm just going to attack with it. I'm just going to play this and attack and let them have this and save this Declaration in Stone for exiling things later on. We might get a young Pyromancer, right? Or hey, we could get a young Pyromancer token. And by the way, they don't get to investigate for tokens. So we'll see here. I guess worst case scenario is my opponent has Fatal Push and they get a Revolt Fatal Push on Benalish Marshal here. That would be pretty bad for us, but there's really not much way around it, and that's what's happening. So, okay. We certainly have those Soul Guide Lanterns in our sideboard for a matchup like this. This deck really heavily relies on its graveyard or a young Pyromancer, and while we can't deal with the graveyard quite yet here, we can take out a young Pyromancer or a Dreadhorde Arcanist should they come down. And that was, instead they chose to put Luris into their hand. So I'd say that's probably a good thing. It's got to be a good sign for us, right? And here we go. This Thraben Inspector is a nice draw because not only does it give us another body, another clue token, it gives us another counter we get to distribute thanks to this Venerated Loxodon here. So despite running removal spells from our opponent, we still now are looking at a hand where we have a board state where we have 8 power in play. We have a removal spell in hand and clues to crack to draw deeper into our deck. So even in sort of a not a great opener for us necessarily, I'd say that things have worked out pretty well here. The tokens they might make aren't going to bother us. It's probably too late for a Dreadhorde Arcanist to be huge. This Declaration in Stone is going to look really nice. I don't know how many I have in my sideboard, so I don't remember if I put any more in there or not. So we'll see what our opponent is up to. They've got 5 cards and 4 mana, and it's just the Lurrus, and they're going to play out a Stitcher's Supplier from the yard. I'm glad. I mean, I mentioned how important it is having 2 power 1-drops, or in this case, growing these with the Loxodon, because it means we get to trade with the Lurrus here, if that's, sort of how things went. Now, that's a Kroxa. That is very much escapable. This is an interesting game. And that is that's a very good draw, is it not? Look, I'm going to hit the Declaration in Stone on the Lurrus, and we're just going to try to go around a future Kroxa here, and I think we might be able to do that. Remember, also, our deck has those Brave the Elements. We could draw any Brave the Elements of the 3 of them, give our creatures protection from black, and just get in a massive hit no matter what they have as far as blockers go. But right now, they're going to chump the 4, take 6, and we'll have sort of broken through at least the early game here. And escaping a Kroxa, if that's what they choose to do, and that eats up their whole turn, that's not that bad for us, right? We lose 3 life, whatever. We have no cards to discard, but then we have 4 attackers. They have 1 blocker, and we get to crack some clues to try to go deeper. So I'm feeling okay. I think this game could go, a removal spell, like a Fatal Push on top of Kroxa. Things might start to look pretty bad for us, but we at least have a possibility to just go around it, depending on what we draw. And remember, this is where I think there's 18 lands in our deck, so there's 14 left. One of them's a Shefet Dunes. That'd be perfectly acceptable to crack. One of them's a Castle Ardenvale, which is certainly not quite as good, but not terrible for us. So really there's only the 12 truly bad draws in the deck with the planes, I think. So any creature we can play, any spell is going to be great. I mean, do we have lethal? No, we just have 11 if we were to draw a Brave the Elements right now. But this looks like a Kroxa coming back from the graveyard to me. Yep, I would imagine they are clicking the cards. Look at that, a fancy one too. Okay, well, we'll go down to 17. As long as, this mana doesn't wreck us too hard, things could be okay here. Depending on what we draw, we're just going to jam in, I think. Certainly if that's what we draw. So now look how big these clues are right now. Just absolutely clutch. Another Thraben Inspector. I think I'll go with the Boros Elite, actually. And then it's almost certainly correct just to attack with everything. We get in for 8 damage this way, hopefully. Put him down to 6. Have, hopefully lethal attacks next turn. Now, if they have Fatal Push or whatever, Lightning Bolt equivalent here, things might look pretty bad for us, but they're thinking about it. This is interesting. I said, Thoughtseize is a big part of the format, and this is the best Thoughtseize deck in the format, maybe. I mean, this or Mono Black Aggro, but our opponent takes they take the 8. They fall down to 6. But now things start to look a little more dangerous, right? If they attack with the Kroxa to get the card out of our hand, that's probably good for us. But I'm more concerned about Kroxa as a blocker, backed up by several removal spells. And remember, they have mana and that clue we gave them to dig a card deeper. So this one, I think, is sort of on the precipice. Could go either way. Certainly depends on what we draw. Any Thalia's Lieutenant, Benalish Marshal type card would be very good for us. But there's also a lot of 1-drops in our deck that don't really do much. So it is good news that they are immediately going to the well here with the clue, investigating to find an answer. But the thing is, it only takes 1 removal spell? No, because we have this, I guess. I was going to say they could block a 3, take 5. What is this? It's metal. All right, well, Dreadbore on the Inspector. Yeah, this is starting to look a little questionable for us here, but we're not out of it yet. In fact, I think I'm still going to be presenting a lethal attack, depending on what goes on here. What a draw. What a draw, I tell you. I mean, heck, we may be even able to, even after losing 2 attackers to the Kroxa, we may still be able to push through lethal damage next turn with draws like this. Okay, this is great. So I'm going to play Thalia's Lieutenant here, and in case things go sideways, we have the crew to crack at the next turn. But wow, that was a close match, or a close game rather. But I'm very glad we got there. And now look at this. We get to completely change our deck here, to an extent anyway. Get these Devout Decrees out there. I want to cut these Boros Elites because they do attack for a lot. But when our opponent's all removal, they're the most likely to just be 1/1s. And I probably want a bunch of this, too, frankly. So, I mean, we only can change so much of our deck. And we'll see what we can do here. I think in the end, I'm going to have to... Something's going to have to give here. So, cut that. Cut this. The Bodyguards are good. The Woe-Reapers are good. It's a bit of a tough one, honestly. Do something like this, maybe? I mean, this definitely is the matchup for Devout Decree. We just have so many options here, right? So I've actually somehow lowered my curve. What if we just go full on greed and cut a land? On the draw, maybe. I don't know. I mean, there's enough RNG where, look, I don't even know that playing 18 lands is correct here. You may want 19, you may want 20. But the difference between 17 and 18 in a deck full of 1-drops and 2-drops is probably minimal enough, where especially where we picked up game 1. All we have to do is just find a hand with two planes here, and then pretty much anything else makes it a keep. So, and as we saw in the last one of the rounds, we can also do perfectly fine when we miss a land drop for a turn or two. I hope I didn't, I tried to not dilute the deck too much here, right? So we cut 5 1-drop creatures. We added in 2 2-drop creatures, and that's it. So, you know what? Whoops. I was thinking about cutting the deck in stone there and bringing back the planes, but I'll tell you, let's just draw a good opening hand. How about that? Let's just, it's so much easier to just cut a land and try to get lucky than have to make a hard decision, right? Of course, this is, I'm Punting Pioneer, Mining Modern every Thursday here on Cool Stuff Inc. I'm picking up a new deck, right? I'm not going to be an expert with it. This is an interesting hand. I don't think I want this. This one looks okay. So I think we ship the... I guess maybe it's the Knight of the White Orchid here. We'll see. I think if we go to 3, I'll probably pull out a Declaration in Stone. I think that's what we should have done. I might have pulled out both of them, maybe? I don't know. It's hard to say. This is going to be a tough one, though. I mean, Thoughtseize coming down here, probably taking the Soul Guide Lantern, if I had to guess. Maybe not, though. Maybe something as simple as the Devout Decree, if they have a Dreadhorde Arcanist on turn 2. They may just want to get this Devout Decree out of here so we can't cast it. My opponent said good one. Okay, well. I think it's good. It's questionable, but they do take the Soul Guide Lantern, hoping that... I'm sure there's a Dreadhorde Arcanist coming on 2, and they're hoping that we don't find the land. You know what? I draw a 3-drop. That might work for them. We might get punished here and have to go to a game 3. But I'll tell you, the White of the Night Orchids are sort of the thing that messes up the math here. Some of the sideboards I look at didn't have that card, and it's one I wanted to try out. And I don't even know, even if it is correct, I don't even know if it's correct in this matchup. And there you go, it's a Dreadhorde Arcanist. So, good news for us if we hit a land. Bad news for us if we don't, right? But guess what? That's a land. Better lucky than good. Now I get to exile a Dreadhorde Arcanist, and on top of that, I get to scry this plains right to the top of my deck. It was close. It was questionable, but look, I think the odds are in our favor after a mulligan and being on the draw to get that second land. So I'm glad that we were able to. And now with a third land on top, I think it might be off to the races. I'm going to go I'll probably go Thalia's Lieutenant, then Dauntless Bodyguard. I think it's still just one counter either way, and we can protect the Lieutenant with the Bodyguard. But I mean, look, a ton could still happen here. We stopped our opponent's best draw, but they could go Young Pyromancer, Fatal Push, and all of a sudden we're still in quite a bit of trouble. So a long way to go here, you know, just because that's why this black-red Arcanist deck is so good. Because even though Thoughtseize into Arcanist is almost unbeatable if it works, but even if it doesn't work, they're still fine. I mean, at the end of the day, they still Thoughtseized us and still went 1-for-1 on removal with us. So I think we won the first 2 turns, but we've got a long way to go. I do like that my opponent's in the tank, though. That means it's not easy for them to decide what they want to do, and they're actually just going to put the Lurrus into their hand. Okay. All right, well, let's go Thalia's Lieutenant, Dauntless Bodyguard. Protecting the Lieutenant with the Bodyguard, and then, of course, growing the Lieutenant with stuff in the future. This starts to look pretty good for us because, I mean, our opponent took a massive tempo hit by putting the Lurrus into their hand. I mean, gosh, do you remember when those things didn't have costs? You could just cast it, and it's insane. But we've put an amount of power into play, right? We have 6 power in play. We have an Anthem effect in our hand, and we have the ability to protect our Thalia's Lieutenant and continue growing it. So this is a difficult position for our opponent to be in. And it's not even the end of the world if we draw lands, right? I mean, our next turn is probably sculpted out. I suppose we could draw something, you know, a 2-drop or something instead that we'd want, but this Marshal is going to be very good here. Putting the Bodyguard to 2 toughness so they don't get an actual trade with the supplier. They milled 3 fairly meaningless cards. I mean, look, Bloodchief Search is great with Dreadhorde Arcanist, right? But the thing about Dreadhorde Arcanist is when you're on the back foot, that card gets a lot worse. I mean, it's a 1/3, not that we're anticipating blocking, but it's certainly not winning any races. And while it is a solid blocker in its own right, if you don't get that down on turn 2 and get a swing with it on turn 3, you almost never get a very clean window to start attacking with it and start generating that value. So, I mean, they're in the tank, so we'll see what's up here. All right, play a land. They actually can't cast Lurrus. Lurrus, with those double mountains, Lurrus would take double black. So they are going to cast something. We'll see what it is. Oh, wow. That's pretty good. That's very good considering our hand. They want to deal 2 damage to our Lieutenant and make us discard a card. Well, I guess if the card in our hand's going away anyways, let's protect the Lieutenant from the K command. We do have to pitch the Benalish Marshal, but now if we draw a land, we get to crack a clue and still have 2 mana available, and if we draw anything else, we get to play it. So what is it? It is, in fact, a land. Okay. Okay. Not the best, but far from the worst, am I right? Continue to grow our Lieutenant. They don't have anything too terrifying in the graveyard quite yet. Now, obviously, if Supplier blocks here and they mill a Kroxa, I start to feel pretty bad, but we will see. 3 lands? Okay. Thoughtseize, Blood Crypt, Stitcher Supplier. I think that's probably as good as it's going to get for us. I mean, look, imagine all the actual board wipes my opponent could have here. Anger of the Gods may not be in the format, but something similar to it might be. And our opponent, they're going to have to shock this in, but they're going to get a Stitcher Supplier back. But hey, I mean, let's see here. I can actually give this Kytheon Indestructible and get a Gideon out of the deal. Might be pretty good. Let's see what they want to do, though. They've shocked it in, and now they get to cast you know, a card from their graveyard. It's basically just a supplier, right? One permanent spell with CMC 2 or less. So, yeah, just the supplier if they want it. Which is certainly a good blocker. You know, if we draw a 2-drop, we have to choose, depending on what it is anyway, we have to choose between giving Kytheon Indestructible and casting that card. And at least as it stands right now, the Lurrus could actually trade with our Thalia's Lieutenant, which I wouldn't particularly want. Well, this was the card I was thinking about drawing, and it is the card that we are going to cast. I say that this is the one that probably would give me the most difficult choice to make here, but it gets a little better because we get to put the counter on the Kytheon. So now, this is a 5/5 Lieutenant. My opponent can no longer take it off the battlefield no matter what they do. They can either double block to get the Inspector out, or they can trade with a Kytheon. Lurrus has lifelink, but this is not what you want to be doing with Lurrus. So they can also just choose to take 6, go down to a very low life total, and instead they're going to choose to trade with Kytheon. I think this does make the most sense from their perspective. And now there is a Kroxa in the graveyard. I don't know why. Oh, when they replayed it. Okay. And they're at 9 life. So, I mean, look, escaping a Kroxa here is pretty solid, depending on what we draw anyway. All right, this might come up. So whenever another human enters the battlefield, you get to put a 1/1 counter on it. Well, this is not so bad for me. Losing 3 life here is fairly irrelevant, and it means they're only going to have the 1 blocker. It means that they're not going to have a removal spell on top of Kroxa, which is what I was actually concerned about. So we'll see what we draw. But the good news is if we hit a land, we can actually just create a human with a castle, which would make this one a 6/6, which would force my opponent to trade with it with the Kroxa, and then allow a hit. So a land is actually very good for us here, and a non-land is probably very good for us too. We have, I guess, not lethal. We have lethal. We have 9 damage if we draw Brave the Elements. So a lot of good draws for us here. A lot of very good draws, I think. I don't see pretty much any way in which they're not forced to trade off. This was a very close match, though. Both of these games are just sort of, you know, on a razor's edge, and anything can make it go the wrong way. So, all right, there is, you know, quote unquote the worst draw on the deck, but it is surprisingly pretty good here. You know what? And I'll tell you, a lot of the lists I looked at were just 18 planes. You know, I've played, I'm not like I have a ton of experience with these archetypes, but Castle Ardenvale is nearly a free roll, and it certainly was the difference maker. Literally the difference maker in this match was just this Castle Ardenvale. Because now we get in for 5 damage. We put our opponent down to 4. Even if they are to Castle Ardenvale again, Kroxa again, we can just activate that castle and just continue spewing out tokens that are going to trigger the Thalia's Lieutenant to make it lethal on top of this, you know, so lots of great combinations of things for us here. And it's all about what that last card in hand for them is. Because Kroxa's coming back for another go-round here. Kroxa number 3. But lots of good draws on our part. Now another land is actually pretty bad, unless that land is a Shefet Dunes. But even still, we get to activate our castle. It's not the end of the world. And I think that works out pretty well here. It's not functionally, you know, a ton different than, say, just activating the castle, but realistically it is. It's going to pump this, it's going to pump this, it's going to, you know, trigger this, and that means that my opponent's last card must be a removal spell, and I don't think it is because they have said GG's. What a close match, an incredibly fun one there against Black Red Arcanist. That was great. This is it feels so good when look, I'm not gonna claim I'm an expert deck brewer anymore or anything like that. You know, I tend to try to highlight decks that are on the fringes of formats rather than invent them, although I love to brew. But this is what I want to do optimally with this series, is take a deck that had a solid finish, figure out small improvements or tweaks we can make to it, and it's incredible when those come into play, like with this Castle Ardenvale giving us the exact trigger we needed to turn that game around. What a match. That was great. All right, we're going to try to finish things off with another win with Mono White, and you know what? 2 lands, this looks like a keeper to me. I think I want to lead on the Woe-Reaper, because if my opponent has removal, I want them to use it on a creature with marginal upside, right? I think the upside of the Kytheon/Gideon in our hand, getting a Planeswalker, and someday in the future maybe, is probably a little more important than, say, if my opponent's just going to fire off a Fatal Push or whatever here on turn 1 and knock out this Woe-Reaper. But it turns out they're ramping instead. So this works out pretty well for us, I have to say. You know, I don't know. Oh, now that changes some stuff. Huh. My first thought was to play the Luminarch Aspirant here, pump up the Woe-Reaper and get in there. But now I have the option of going... I could attack. I doubt my opponent's going to block. If they do, whatever. But then I can go Kytheon plus Thraben Inspector and set up a monster next turn. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I mean, look, if my opponent blocks here, sure, I guess our plan is slightly worse. But yeah, I mean, realistically, they're never going to block. So yeah, I think I'm into this. We set up the ability to pick up a Gideon on turn 3 with this attack, while still, you know, hey, getting in a similar amount of damage. I mean, we lose out on 1 counter here, but hey, we put 3 power in play this turn instead of, you know, 2. So, a Thopter Engineer giving all the creatures haste, well, that is certainly a bit scary. A land here is not, I mean, I guess it doesn't change too much, but it's certainly, I certainly am happy with it. I think I want to go with the Thalia's Lieutenant so that they don't have good trades. So now we get to attack. I have the Brave the Elements. If I really want to, say they double block the Kytheon, right? I can Brave the Elements, get rid of the Thopter Engineer. Wow, and this is going to work out too. This is beautiful. So this is the dream. My opponent's basically priced into that block, but you see how incredible Brave the Elements can be. We have protection from the Thopter Engineer. It goes to the graveyard. We have a Gideon that can do some stuff like, let's see here, I gotta read this. Until end of turn, it can become a 4/4, sure. Up to 1 target creature an opponent controls attacks Gideon, or until your next turn, target creature gains indestructible, untap that creature. Well, it's a +2 or a +1. I really don't see my opponent attacking the Gideon. I also don't know that it's necessarily it's even going to matter here. But sure, I'll make the Thopter attack Gideon so that my opponent is down a blocker next turn. I think that makes sense. If we hit land, we can crack the clue and play the Aspirant. And look, I think some weird things have to happen for it to not just be correct to always play the Aspirant on turn 2. But I actually think that the way this game played out and the blocks my opponent had set up and so on, I think that this was a game where we actually sequenced this stuff correctly. I mean, we are having just an absolute monster turn come up that has the potential to be even better. You know, a land allows us to draw an extra card, but a 1-drop allows us to fill the board up even more. This seems bad, though. Our opponent's going to cast Eldritch Evolution, sacrificing their Elvish Mystic, allowing them to get a card I didn't even realize was legal in Pioneer, I guess, Voice of Resurgence. It is a good blocker. Unfortunately for them, I don't think it's going to be good enough. That's obviously a great draw. I mean, this was just, it all came up white weenie in this one. All right, let's go ahead and get our clue. Get a counter, and I guess I could still make a creature indestructible if I wanted. I'm going to put this counter here, which means all of my attacking creatures are going to have 3 toughness. So I think that I will turn Gideon into a creature and do some attacking. All right, we'll put this over here. And we're just swinging for what? Lethal? 4, 7, 9, 13. Looks like lethal to me. They're going to have to chump block here and go to 2. So... you know, look, with Eldritch Evolution in my opponent's deck, that's an incredibly powerful card. That's a combo card. It does almost anything you want it to. It's one of my pet cards I shove into every Mighty Modern deck I can find. I have to say, though, it does scare me a little bit that, you know, something could actually happen here to get back at us. And, I mean, this might be it. I think we're fine, but Winota with 2 triggers, that means they get to look at the top 6 cards and put 2 humans into play. Unfortunately for them, those humans don't answer a giant board, so we are good to go. So it is Naya Winota. Very good deck. I would like, this is the one awkward thing about this card, is it's a sorcery, which means my opponent will get to Winota trigger regardless. So yeah, it's kind of rough. We don't have any instant speed removal here, and it might come back and get us. I think the Woe-Reapers are on the lower end here, so I'm going to cut them and just, well, I guess just roll with that. Yeah, maybe I want a Devout Decree. I don't know. We have the Declarations in Stone. We have the Devout Decree. The problem is, you know, I don't want to have a bunch of Devout Decrees in hand and still lose to a Winota trigger anyway. So at some point, there's just such diminishing returns to sorcery speed removal, particularly, you know, removal that we're targeting at the Winota. The deck and stones are fine. We can hit the tokens that come out beforehand, but I think we want a very aggressive hand that can try to, you know, look, because the thing about Winota clearly is that the creatures have to attack. So if the creatures aren't attacking, if we force their creatures into blocking, Winota becomes much, much worse. So we're going to ship this one and keep this one. This looks pretty solid to me. I have to throw something back here. It's going to be the Brave the Elements. I think we, as much, I mean, look, that card was MVP in the first game. May or may not have been the difference in it entirely. But in this case, I think we just want all the creatures we can get along with this one removal spell. So I believe that I'm just going to lead off on Kytheon here. Next turn, I'll play Bodyguard and Inspector. Try to set up the same turn 3 Kytheon we had before, but my opponent is really popping off. And unfortunately, I kind of have to let this Goblin hit come in because we didn't play the Inspector. So, yeah, if my opponent has the turn 3 Winota, we're going to be in a ton of trouble, and there's just nothing that can be done about it. If they trade with the Kytheon here, which would be kind of a cheeky play, but I think we just might be in a world of hurt here. All right, we'll pass the turn. I mean, look, it's not like our hand is pretty solid, or rather our board is, but here comes Winota, and we have to hope that it's only 2 triggers. So let's scratch that. It's 3 triggers. Maybe they'll whiff on the top 18. What a ridiculous card. Just this card is a fire design, whatever. Ikoria was sort of the height of cards that shouldn't be printed, and I think this qualifies, right? This is turn 3. Neat. Cool. I thought we got rid of all the combo decks in Pioneer. And that is why Devout Decree is just actually useless. All right. Let's try again. I guess sometimes you just get killed on turn 3 by a creature deck. It's hard to complain, too, about Winota, because as silly as what just happened was, it's a creature deck. And yet it is also a ridiculous combo deck. But I'm in for this hand. It looks pretty good to me. 4 1-drops and I'm sorry, 5. Yeah, 4 1-drops and a deck in stone. I'm in. Maybe no turn 3 Winota from our opponent and we'll be okay. The thing about the Winota decks is they get really clunky if you're playing against an opponent that just has, you know, the old basic counter magic for your 4-mana card. Or, you know, something as simple as an instant speed removal spell. And look, our deck is particularly ill-suited to deal with it, but that was an incredibly powerful start from them. But here we go. It's the first one. They mulliganed. It's the first game of the match where they don't have the turn 1 mana dork, and I think that is that's huge. That could very much be the difference in the game. Because look, Winota won them the game, but let's be honest. Elvish Mystic won them that game. Turn 2 Legion Warboss, turn 3 Winota. That's the dream out of that deck. So, you know what? I'm going to go in with this, I guess. We'll play our Elite out here. We'll play the Bodyguard, I guess, protecting the Elite. And we're set up for another powerful turn 3. Unless this is, of course, removal. Rending Volley for the Bodyguard. Sure, that's fine. If they play a creature that we need a deck in stone, we can do that. If not, we can play the Inspector, crack a Clue, depending on what we draw. And, I mean, we still get to poke in for some damage here. The Boros Elite is this interesting card because it's got an upside, right? It's a 3/3 sometimes when it attacks, but also a downside in that if you can't come up with the other creatures, it's a 1/1 that I can't even swing into this This Burning Tree Emissary. Let's see what we hit, though. Dauntless Bodyguard. Okay. Well, let's swing with our Woe-Reaper and see if they trade. All right, no trades. Yeah, I think it's just Inspector plus Bodyguard here. It's very slightly mana inefficient, but I think it's worth it just to get as many creatures into play as possible, set up as big of a turn as possible. If we can put pressure on our opponent before Winota becomes a problem. We can also use the Deck and Stone as sort of a tempo play just to keep creatures away from them that would trigger Winota. So here comes a Legion War Boss, and this is frankly not that great for them because we get to eat the token with the Thraben Inspector. And depending on what we draw here, we can do all kinds of stuff. That's exactly what I wanted. I wanted a 1-drop or a land. So I'm going to actually Deck and Stone the War Boss because they are not going to have time. This is almost just 2 mana. I'm not even going to say Swords to Plowshares or Path to Exile. You pay 1 more mana, but it might be better than both those cards in this deck because we are not giving our opponent any opportunity to crack that clue in a way that actually matters. So, I'm just going to swing in with these 3, keep the Inspector back, and it's going to be a big hit. And there you go. My opponent is priced into taking the trade. We get a follow-up with yet another 2-power 1-drop, and now, so what if they have Winota, right? We have lethal in play. 4, 5, I take that back. We have 8 damage in play. A Voice of Resurgence is certainly a good answer. Now let's draw a Lord and just end the game, though. What do you say? Oh, my gosh. What a draw. What a draw. The second Deck and Stone off the top. Get out of here. Get out of here. Voice of Resurgence. Nothing but clues for you, friend. 1 life. I can't imagine any way for them to get out of this outside of a red sweeper. And there you go. We have taken it down. So looking at this deck, what would we change after this 3-0 we put up with White Weenie Humans? Frankly, probably not much. I feel good about the Shefet Dunes and the Castle Ardenvale I added. You know, it's conceivable this card. I haven't actually decided if this card is good or bad. It's a 2/2 for 1 mana if it's your second spell each turn, and you get to, you know, move the counter, so you can sometimes cast it pre-combat and get an extra point in immediately. It's got Vigilance. So, I don't know. You know, is that better than just simply more 2-power 1-drops or maxing out on the Brave the Elements? I don't know. But for all the reasons, Deck and Stone is incredible. That last match just showed it. I would not cut these. I would actually put 2 more of these into the sideboard. This card is incredible. The Knight of the White Orchids were, you know, an innovation I wanted to try out. It didn't really come up. It matters probably more against control-type decks where you just want to have, you don't necessarily want to have lands in hand, but it doesn't hurt to hit your land drops so that you don't stumble and, hey, maybe you can start turning out some Ardenvale tokens. Well, everybody, that's the deck. It is White Weenie in Pioneer, and it is good right now. The human sub-theme of Mono White 1-Drops deck is incredible, and this performed very well. Very happy with this. Thank you so much for watching Punting Pioneer, everybody. I'm here on Cool Stuff every Thursday with either Mighty Modern or Punting Pioneer. You can find my coverage for Wizards of the Coast, my podcast, Brainstorm Brewery, or you can follow me on Twitter at Chosler, C. Hosler, Hosler. So, everybody, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week.